Hello Doomers and Doomettes, I'm your host Didi, and oh boy, I'm sure this video will be a little bit controversial. Okay, you saw the title, let's get this out of the way. This video will contain spoilers for the entirety of Attack on Titan, but I mean you clicked on the video, what were you expecting? Alright, come on, let's get this over with.
I wish I were a bird.
What? What the fuck?
Den. I'm Didi, and today we're going to be talking about Attack on Titan's final chapter, chapter 139. Attack on Titan has recently ended, and it really had its issues. Personally, I'm not sure if I would say it's one of the worst endings I've seen, or if it's even that bad. There are definitely way worse offenders out there. And hey, unlike some other series, at least it had an ending. But the ending we got feels like it contradicts a lot of the story and characters, and many people, whether you supported Eren's actions or were cheering for his defeat, seem to feel rather discontent. First off, let me say that if you enjoyed the ending or thought it was great, I'm really happy for you. No one should ever be attacking anyone for their feelings in regards to this, and if you disagree with any of the points I make, I just want to say that this is a result of my own thoughts and feelings towards the series, as well as my own personal interpretations, and I hope to promote some healthy discussion as a result of this. There's going to be a lot to get into, so let's try to break this video down best we can. I'm going to start off by talking about the characters in this chapter, before going into detail about the series' themes and how the ending sort of contradicts a lot of the story beats and concepts introduced in my opinion. Then we'll get to the real juicy part, where we talk about what I think the true ending of the series was, and I'll provide some facts to back that up, so make sure you stick around to the end of the video because there's going to be a lot to review. So first off, what was I expecting for this chapter? Well, I wasn't expecting answers for absolutely everything. If I'm honest, I don't think we needed a total origin for the Titans. Sometimes there are story beats that you just need to believe and roll with. For example, you don't need quirks to be explained in My Hero Academia or stands in JoJo, they're just sort of there. What was more important to me was the character perspectives to provide insight for their actions, namely, Eren of course. Now, Eren has been on a very wild character course. Starting off as an irrational hothead, once he gets the series ending spoiled to him, his personality drastically changes. He appears to be more driven and is presenting himself as someone willing to destroy the rest of the world if it means saving his friends from the impending war. Over the 4-year period, it appeared that he drastically lost faith in the ability of others to get things done before accepting his fate and taking matters into his own hands. Prior to the events of chapter 139, it can be surmised that Eren still cares for his friends, but doesn't want them around as he goes on to commit atrocities. When considering the situation and knowing peace negotiations have failed, Eren is presented with two options. He can either protect his precious island at the cost of the rest of the world, or allow the world to destroy everything he's known. And it's completely in his character to choose to kill the world if it means saving his friends, especially after what he's lived through. But to only go halfway, or rather 80% of the way? One of the main themes of Attack on Titan is the circular history. It's something Eren Kruger has brought up, and it introduced the themes of needing to break the cycle, which means doing things that you don't even want to do in the first place. Eren Yeager even said this to his own father when reminding him to kill the Rice family. The ideology of keep moving forward is rather simple. To Eren, it symbolizes sticking to his ideology, and this will sound silly, but the mere idea of moving forward inherently contradicts circular movement. But the problem with the ending is, the circle wasn't broken, and Eren even knows it won't be broken by his actions. Yet, he does it anyway, which in turn will create more repeating events. Let me explain what I mean. By letting Armin and the Alliance beat him, he's essentially duplicated the very events from about 100 years ago, allowing Armin and his friends to be praised like the Tiber family, and this is something that Armin and Eren directly admit. Essentially, what happened in the last Great Titan War was the first King of the Walls conspired with the Tiber family to allow himself to be viewed as the great villain, so the Tibers could be put in a situation where they'd be able to end the wars and take the Eldians with him. And this is exactly what happens here. Eren puts himself in a situation where he'll be viewed as the villain and allows his friends to be praised as the heroes who stop him. But the problem with that is, when it happened the first time, it just led to more racism against the Eldians. So, if essentially the same events have happened here, who's to say they won't happen again? Even look at the current events. Despite the Marley battlefield commander in the final attack giving a grand speech that essentially boiled down to, if we live, I promise I'll never be a dick again, only to, when they survive, already have their guns pointed at everyone. Sure, he said he wouldn't be a racist, but his actions in demanding proof that they're human instead of rejoicing that they're alive surely displays otherwise. In fact, there's several points in the series that seem to prove the very opposite, that peace cannot hold this way. In the long, long ago days of the Trostar, this was spoken about between Eren and Dot Pixis, and both characters agreed that a common enemy would not solve humanity's problems, as even with a common foe, humanity still has infighting. Allow me to list off a few other events which all happen in later chapters. Jean expressed expresses concern over what stopping Eren would accomplish, as he points out Marley would still likely retaliate when they can, and they'd essentially be back where they started. During the eve of the attack, Yelena mocks the Alliance, saying how everyone is getting drunk off the ideology of saving the world together despite their history of brutality between each other, which already was in the name of saving the world. And when Flock returns to shoot at the airship, Hanji even gives him credit and admits that his own ideologies of needing a devil to save them may be right, but she still doesn't support death in any way. But we'll come back to Flock in a bit. What makes these moments very peculiar would be that many of these are actually shared viewpoints by many members of the fandom, and it's almost as if the characters are pointing out their flaws that many fans have, and not in a meta sense or to refer to the fandom, but rather displaying that these characters are critical thinkers and essentially recognizing the same things that we are. So with that in mind, if there are other Marleyans alive, what does killing 80% of the world accomplish if that means they'll just go back to war? It may have evened out the playing field to remove Titans and essentially have the populations be equal, but if that didn't work before, what's the difference now? You may be thinking that the difference is there's no more Titans, and that's a good thing, right? Well, not exactly. The main major problem with the Alliance is that they were not representative of the island of Paradis. In fact, it seems that the island was in support of nuking the world, so to say, which can essentially be seen in how many people supported the Alliance and how many people were serving under Flock, the Jaegerist faction. In fact, the Jaegerists had such overwhelming support, especially after they purged the remainder of the old military with the wine, that they are now essentially the entire military force on the island. The issue at hand here is that the Jaegerists aren't exactly something that Eren sought out to create himself. It's rather Flock's ideology that they follow. They may seem similar at first, but remember, it was Flock who believed in the creation of a new Eldian empire. He was the one convincing new recruits to join them. Eren merely took advantage of them in the situation, but the Jaegerists are now a dedicated faction who idolize Eren with the viewpoint of Flock that they are island devils who need a devil as a savior. I'm sure I don't need to explain why a militarized faction of people who revere a man who nearly wiped out the planet is probably not willing to sit down and demilitarize. It's almost as if the only person who absolutely got what they wanted in the end was Flock. Thanks to him, the military isn't in the hands of someone reliable like Historia, but rather people who idolize Eren. So if you think peace would come because there are no more Titans, I really want you to consider that. Do you think the remainder of the world would sleep well without giant Titans when a militarized island is chanting, if you don't fight, you can't win? The other thing I'd like to address briefly is the perceived change in Ymir's character. When we first received her true backstory, we were told how she was a slave, and honestly her backstory is pretty brutal. She's a child, forced into subservience, and forced to bear children to the first king. Now, this was just my interpretation, but when she sacrificed herself to save the king's life, I personally didn't find it to be a heroic moment. With the way it was structured, I saw it that she was seeking a reason to die, especially considering how the king demanded that she didn't die, and she didn't appear to use any regenerative capabilities. And what happens to her? Her body is eaten by her children, and she's forced to construct Titans for centuries and centuries before Eren breaks her free, saying they will destroy the world together. Now, personally, with how this is constructed, this feels more like Ymir is taking revenge out on a world that tortured her, especially with her completely ignoring Zeke's request. So, how can you turn around and say Ymir actually loved the first king? To me, that seems more like an extremely abusive situation, and it really muddies her character quite a bit. Unlike other characters in the story, such as Erwin and Armin, or Reiner and Eren, who have parallels in their character traits, Ymir is really not like Mikasa at all. Especially since the king tortured her and didn't save her life in any way. He was shown to be truly horrible to her, so from a reading standpoint, to say she truly loved him, it's a bit of an uncomfortable read to say the least. Now it's time to get on our tinfoil hats and buckle up, because I'm going to talk about how I think the series was really supposed to end. While this is going to be a little bit speculative, I am going to be basing everything I can in facts and information previously given to us. Now, it's no doubt that Hajima Isayama is very good at foreshadowing and has a very clear image of what he wants to set up when he wants to. Even if things change, he appears to know the general direction he wants things to go in, and things get expanded upon from there. While the anime featured more foreshadowing than the manga, simply due to coming out later, there's still a very fair amount of subtle hints and references that are meant to be teases towards future events in the series. To start as a foundation, I'd like to bring up a few interviews, all of which will have their sources listed in the description below. In an interview in 2013, after the success of the anime's first season, Isayama talks a little bit about the ending. He mentions that he initially was seeking to end it in a traumatic way, citing that he took inspiration from the movie The Mist, where, well, I guess we're gonna spoil a movie from 2007, the main cast is mostly killed off and the ending is extremely bleak. He follows this up by saying although it was his initial intention, he now thinks that it might be a little bit too cruel for the fans so attached to the characters from the anime. In 2015, another interview took place where Isayama mentioned that Armin and Eren might not remain friends in the future. For an understanding of the timeline of things, 2015 was approximately when the Uprising arc was wrapping up, so things were quite a bit away from Marley and all that other fun stuff. This shows that in 2015, Isayama was still thinking ahead about an ending where Eren would possibly do some morally questionable things, as he even said he wanted Armin to be the sympathetic character and Eren to embody the story's themes and pushing the plot forward. This is a very interesting thing to mention, especially considering how things turned out. Finally, the last interview I'd like to refer to came in 2016, where he once again refers to the ending of the series. According to the translations, Isayama said that until recently, his stance was to give the series a very dark ending, to shock and betray the manga readers, but he says that his mindset has shifted recently and is unsure where to go. This also coincides with a comment from the series editor in 2015, where he says that the series was extended as the plan was initially to end the series at volume 20, but now it's been extended to volume 22 or volume 23. As we know now, this is inaccurate as we've really made it to 34 volumes. So what happened? I think from that information, we can surmise that the ending was initially designed to be very dark. While that doesn't say it was confirmed to be a pure genocide ending, the 2015 interview tells us that he very likely already had the concepts in mind of Eren going rogue and losing his friendship with Armin, and the 2016 interview tells us that he recently changed his mind but was still unsure of things. And here's where I'd like to go to speculate. I'd like to think what happened was that Isayama had a vision in mind of a bitter end for the series with a lot more character deaths, and considering how Isayama's writing style is, such an ending would require years of build-up and foreshadowing, just as a house is built upon foundation. But as the story progressed, Isayama was unsure if he wanted to stick with that particular ending still, especially after seeing how attached many fans were getting to the characters and the current story structure. And think about it, to really have a happy ending, you would need to completely shift the entire structure of the events that came before, which would mean an entire story overhaul. So what I personally believe happened was Isayama kept the main story beats and structure that he wanted, but merely swapped out the ending. While I don't have proof for that, I think it's very likely to be a possibility. Now, I know it's been announced that the final volume will contain additional pages, but forgive my pessimism, I don't really think that will exactly resolve these issues. Personally, I don't feel like the problem was a lack of explanations, but the shift in story structure, and the fact that the ending really isn't an ending. The situation was resolved, and the cycle continues. Maybe if it was constructed in a sense to show the inevitability of history repeating itself, that would be one thing. But it still comes across to me as a bit too optimistic, despite the fact that 80% of the world was wiped out and a militarized faction idolizes Eren's doctrine. It seems to feel a bit hopeful for the chance of peace when everything else in the story seems to suggest otherwise, and I don't think a few extra pages will resolve that. So, with all that said and done, how do I feel about Attack on Titan? I still think I really enjoyed it, honestly. It hasn't always been perfect, and there was a period where I actually dropped off of it for a bit, but I do think that the overall structure is pretty good, and even if the ending doesn't quite stick for me, endings seem really hard to land in general. There are many series conclusions that I don't feel truly satisfied with. Attack on Titan is the kind of series I would recommend, but I would likely warn others that I wasn't satisfied with the ending, but I'd still encourage them to try and see it for themselves and come to their own conclusions. Overall, I still think Attack on Titan is one of the best stories I've seen, with its plot twists and revealing of certain characters as well as the big basement reveal, so I still think I would personally recommend it overall. And with Attack on Titan finished, there's one thing I can say for sure. I'm really gonna miss justifying Eren's actions to my friends, but on the bright side, there's no shortage of fictional genocidal maniacs and morally questionable madmen in anime for me to try to play devil's advocate for.
Why you boring me? I'm right.
If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry that this came out a little later than I intended. The past few weeks have been a little occupied for me with finals as they come up. What were your thoughts on the series finale? Do you think there was a different ending planned? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, or if you have any suggestions for future videos. Next video I've lined up is going to be the overdue all-for-one analysis video, and I do want to take some time to talk about Flock in the future at one point. If you like this and don't want to miss out on those videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to help this channel grow. Each of you viewers really means a lot to me, and I'm going to be working on returning the favor with some giveaways soon, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, and I hope I can see you next time.